The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. It came down in sheets against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Harrington Tower, turning the Manhattan skyline into a blur of smeared gold. 46 floors below, yellow cabs crawled through the slush like tired insects. Up here, on the private dining level reserved for men who could buy the weather if they wanted to, the silence had a price tag. Nathan Harrington sat alone at a table set for two. He hadn't touched the wine. A 1982 Margaux, decanted an hour ago by a sommelier who had been warned, gently, not to speak to him tonight. The second chair across from him was empty. It had been empty for 2 years, 4 months, and 16 days, and he still couldn't bring himself to have it removed from the reservation. His fork moved through the sea bass without commitment. His assistant had ordered for him. His driver had walked him to the elevator. His security detail stood 6 feet behind him, reading the room the way other men read newspapers. Nathan Harrington, 41 years old, worth $11 billion by last quarter's valuation, CEO of a shipping and logistics empire that moved a quarter of everything that entered the port of New York, was being handled. He knew it. He allowed it. Grief had made him a patient he barely recognized. "Good evening, sir. I'll be serving you tonight." He didn't look up. He'd learned not to look up at waitstaff. It was easier. Eye contact was a contract, and he had no more contracts left in him. "The chef has prepared I'm fine with what's in front of me." His voice was flat, not cruel, just closed, the way a safe is closed, and the young woman standing at his elbow seemed to understand that tone the way she might understand weather. She nodded once, stepped back, topped off his water without rattling the ice, and that was when he saw it. Just a flicker, just a glint of something pale gold swinging out from beneath the black collar of her uniform as she leaned across the table to adjust his bread plate. A small oval locket on a thin gold chain. Nothing, really. Half the women in this city wore lockets. It meant nothing. He was 41, and tired, and his wife was dead, and he should eat his fish and go home. Except he had commissioned that locket. He had sketched its engraving himself on the back of a cocktail napkin at a hotel bar in Lucerne 7 years ago, while Eleanor laughed at him and told him he drew like a child. Nathan's hand froze around his wineglass. The stem, fine Austrian crystal, trembled against his knuckle. Behind the woman, rain slid down the black window in long silver lines. She had already turned away. She was walking back toward the kitchen in quiet, practiced steps, her ponytail a dark rope against the starched white of her shirt collar, completely unaware that the most powerful man in the room had just stopped breathing. On the locket he had seen it. He was sure he had seen it was a tiny engraved letter E, inside a circle of laurel. E for Eleanor, his dead wife, who he had identified, in a closed casket, just over 2 years ago. He set the wineglass down, very carefully, the way a bomb technician sets something down. "Miss." His voice barely carried, but the 2 bodyguards behind him reacted as if he'd fired a gun. One stepped forward. Nathan raised a single finger without looking at him, and the man stopped. The waitress turned. From across the room, her face was ordinary, in the way faces are ordinary when you are not looking for them. Pale, heart-shaped, a small scar on the eyebrow, eyes the color of rained-on slate. Young, not girlish, but not yet fully settled into herself. She looked, he realized, with a strange cold crawl up the back of his neck, like no one he had ever seen before in his life. And yet, "Yes, sir? That necklace," he said. "Where did you get it?" She didn't answer, not right away, and in the 3 seconds she stood there, Nathan Harrington's entire life, the version of it he had been living for 2 years and 4 months, quietly began to come apart at the seams. He didn't know that yet. He only knew that his hand would not let go of the wineglass. Before she answers him, "I have to take you somewhere else first." 2 years and 4 months earlier. A coastal highway in Portugal. A phone call at 4:17 in the morning, and a body in a closed casket that, as it will turn out, was not the body of the woman Nathan Harrington had buried. If you want to see how that casket got closed, hit subscribe and stay with me. I'll meet you on the other side of that phone call. The call came at 4:17 a.m. Nathan had been asleep on the couch in his home office. He slept on that couch more than he slept in his bed in those days. Eleanor used to joke about it, used to threaten to have it removed when his phone lit the ceiling blue. It was his head of personal security, Tobin Reeves, a former ranger, quiet the way surgeons are quiet, who did not call at 4:17 a.m. for anything small. "Sir," a breath. "There's been an accident." The next 36 hours were the longest of Nathan's life, and also, somehow, the shortest. He flew to Lisbon on the company jet without changing his shirt. Eleanor had been driving from the villa to the airport in Porto. She was supposed to be coming home. She had been gone exactly 11 days on what she called a writing retreat, which was what she called her trips whenever she needed to be alone, which had been happening more and more in the last year of their marriage, although he had not let himself see that until later. She had been alone in the rental car. It had gone off a cliff road outside Nazaré, the same stretch of coast where she had rented, oddly, 3 different villas in 3 different summers, all within a 10-mile radius, a detail no one had flagged at the time. The car was recovered. The body, they used the word body, and he remembers it like a cut, was recovered 3 kilometers down the coast, 2 days later. Identification had been difficult. That was the word the Portuguese police used. Difficult. Her face, the water, the rocks. Tobin had flown out ahead of him and had made the identification himself, because Nathan, in a moment he would later hate himself for, had said the words "I can't" into the phone, and Tobin had said, "I know, sir. I'll handle it." A wedding ring. A Street Christopher medal on a chain. A small scar on the lower abdomen, matching her medical records. The casket was closed at the funeral. Eleanor's sister wept into Nathan's shoulder and told him she had been dreading this exact call for a year, because Eleanor had been driving faster and faster lately, because Eleanor had not been herself. The life insurance paid out $412 million 90 days later. Nathan had it moved, untouched, into a trust in Eleanor's name that funded a cancer research wing at Sloan Kettering. He never took $1 of it. He never went inside the wing. His assistants whispered, kindly, that he should get out more. He fired the ones who whispered loudest. He put on a black suit every morning for 6 months, and then, one Tuesday, stopped. Not because he was healing, because he had simply run out of the particular fuel that grief requires, and what was left was something colder. He was, if you had asked anyone who knew him, a man who had accepted what happened. He was not. At Harrington Global, on the executive floors below the restaurant where Nathan was now sitting frozen with a wineglass trembling in his hand, there was a framed photograph in the main lobby. Eleanor on their wedding day, barefoot on a beach in Maine, laughing at something off camera. The staff had learned not to linger in front of it. The staff had learned a lot of things in the last 2 years. They had learned that Mr. Harrington did not take meetings before 9 a.m. anymore, because 9 a.m. used to be when Eleanor brought him coffee, and he could not trust himself to look at the door before 9. They had learned that he did not eat in the executive dining room. They had learned that he wore the same 3 suits, all charcoal, all cut by the same tailor in Savile Row, because Eleanor had picked that tailor, and he would not be picking another one. They had learned that his anger was not loud. It was quiet and precise, and it had cost 43 mid-level executives their jobs in 24 months. He had not softened. He had sharpened. The private dining room on the 47th floor, the one he was in tonight, was a restaurant called Verine, operated under a lease from Harrington Tower. The owner, a French chef named Laurent, had been told, the day Nathan started dining there once a week, that the staff rotated for him. He was never to be served by the same person twice. He did not want to be remembered. He did not want to be recognized. He wanted to eat and leave, which was why the young woman who had just poured his water tonight, a woman he had never seen before in his life, should have been the last thing on his mind. Except for the locket, that necklace, he said again, because she had not answered. She was standing very still now, 3 feet from his table. The water pitcher was in her right hand, her left hand, and he watched this. He watched it the way he watched the bottom line of a hostile takeover had drifted, unconsciously, to the hollow of her throat, where the locket had already slipped back beneath her collar. Sir, where did you get it? Not a question. A cut. She swallowed. He watched her swallow. He watched the tendon in her neck move, the small, tight way people move when they have been asked something they did not prepare for. Behind her, a busboy passed with a tray of water glasses, and she flinched, barely, as if the sound of the glasses had startled her out of something. It was my mother's, she said. Her voice was low, even. He noticed that. He noticed everything now. Your mother's. Yes, sir. And what was your mother's name? A pause. A pause half a second too long. And in that half second, Nathan Harrington, who had negotiated against heads of state, felt the floor tilt under his shoes. Catherine, she said. Catherine Shaw. The name meant nothing. He almost let his shoulders drop. He almost let himself breathe. Almost. Because Eleanor's middle name was Catherine, and Shaw was Eleanor's mother's maiden name. And nobody, not the press, not the wedding announcement, not even Eleanor's own Wikipedia page, had ever put those two things together in public. "Sit down," Nathan said. The waitress blinked. "Sir, I can't. I'm on shift." "Sit down." He said it quietly. He always said things quietly. Tobin Reeves, his head of security, who had been standing against the wall pretending to be invisible for the last 90 minutes, stepped forward half an inch. The waitress saw Tobin, and Nathan, who noticed everything now, noticed the way her eyes moved quickly, economically, sweeping the exits, counting the staff the way a civilian does not count exits. He filed it. He said nothing. She sat. She set the water pitcher down on the linen tablecloth with the careful attention of a woman who did not want to make a sound. "Show me the locket," he said. "Sir, please." The please came out like a man who had not said the word in 2 years. He heard it leave his mouth, and he heard how it sounded. And he watched her hear it too. And something passed over her face, a softness, almost, a grief that he did not understand before she reached up and unclasped the chain and laid it on the white tablecloth between them. He did not pick it up. He could not, actually. His hand would not have obeyed him. He looked at it where it lay, the small oval, gold, warm from her skin, the letter E inside a laurel wreath, and on the back he knew, though he could not see it from this angle, he knew because he had watched it being engraved by a jeweler in the 6th arrondissement, 3 words in Nathan's own handwriting. "Come home safely." "Turn it over," he said. She did. "Come home safely." In his handwriting, the small slanted N at the end of Nathan that he had, at the jeweler's suggestion, added as a signature on the back. The jeweler had closed his shop in 2019. The locket had been a one-off commission. There was, in the world, exactly one of these. He had put it around Eleanor's neck on their 5th anniversary. She had been wearing it the day her car went off the cliff. It had not been listed in the inventory of recovered personal effects. Nathan Harrington, in the private dining room of Vereen, on the 47th floor of his own building, put his face in his hands. He did not cry. He hadn't cried at the funeral. He hadn't cried in the identification room in Portugal, when Tobin had handed him the St. Christopher medal in a plastic evidence bag. He was not going to start now, in front of a stranger. When he lowered his hands, the waitress was still sitting there, very small, very pale, and the locket was still on the tablecloth between them like a piece of evidence at a trial he did not know he was attending. "What is your name?" he said. "Mara." A breath. "Mara Shaw. And your mother?" He did not recognize his own voice. "The woman who gave you this. When did she die?" Mara's mouth opened, closed. Her eyes gray, he had thought, but up close they were a pale, pale green, the color of sea glass filled, just for a second. And she looked away at the window and the rain and the city, and she said, 8 months ago. Cancer. She'd been sick for close to a year by the end. She gave me the locket before she went into hospice. She said it was the only thing she'd kept from her old life. Her old life. She didn't talk about it. She raised me in a trailer outside Reno. She cleaned houses, took in laundry. Mara stopped. Swallowed. She drank sometimes. Not always. She said she had done something once that she was paying for forever. She never said what. Nathan sat very still. Outside, a car horn bleated 3 floors down. The sommelier, at the far end of the room, pretended not to be watching them. Tobin Reeves, he knew without looking, had already signaled his men in the lobby. No one was leaving this restaurant in the next 10 minutes unless Nathan Harrington said so. "When were you born?" he asked. "March 14, 1997. Eleanor had been 20 in March of 1997. Eleanor had been, according to every document in Nathan's private files, an only child raised in Concord, Massachusetts, the only daughter of a circuit court judge and a librarian, educated at Choate, and about to begin her junior year at Yale, a woman whose life was one of the most documented lives in the tri-state philanthropic scene. Nathan had not met Eleanor until 2013. "Mara," he said, "do you know who I am?" She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since she had sat down, and he saw, in her face, the specific kind of fear a waitress has for a man whose name is on the building she works in. "Yes, sir," she said. "Everyone knows who you are. Did the woman who raised you ever say my name?" A long pause. "Once," Mara said. "When she was on the morphine, at the end. She said she was sorry to the man with the gray eyes. She said she hoped he had found someone else. Nathan Harrington's eyes were gray. He did not sleep that night. He took Mara Shaw home not in the way the tabloids would later imply, not at all in his own car, with Tobin driving, because the rain had gotten worse and she had told him, in the quiet small voice of a person who was no longer sure what was happening to her life, that she took the bus back to a studio apartment in Astoria, and he had said, "No, you don't." She sat in the back of the Maybach with her hands folded in her lap and her ponytail damp against her neck and her uniform apron still tied around her waist, and he sat across from her and did not speak, and the city slid past them in wet neon. At her building, a 4-story walk-up with a broken buzzer and a smell of cumin in the hallway, he said, "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. A car will come. You'll come to my office. We'll talk. I'll pay you for the time you would have worked. Sir, I have a shift at... I own the restaurant." She closed her mouth. "Mara." He waited until she looked up. "I'm not going to hurt you. I need you to understand that. I don't know what's happening. I don't know who your mother was." He could not finish the sentence. "I need to find out. I need you to help me find out. I will pay you whatever your rent is for the next 6 months, and you will not work a restaurant shift while we do this. Do you understand?" She was crying, quietly. The way people cry when they have practiced crying quietly because there was no one, in a trailer outside Reno, who wanted to hear them. "Okay," she said. He watched her walk up the stoop. He watched the broken buzzer. He watched the rain come down on her hair. Then he pulled out his phone and called Tobin Reeves in the driver's seat, 2 feet away from him, because he could not trust himself to say it out loud without the buffer of a phone. "Tobin. Sir, I want Eleanor's case reopened. The Portuguese side, the insurance side, everything. I want the body in the casket exhumed. I want dental records. I want DNA. I want the medical examiner who signed the report pulled out of retirement if we have to." A silence. "Sir." Tobin's voice was very careful. "I made that identification. I know you did. If I was wrong, Tobin, you made the identification I told you to make in the condition I couldn't handle making it in. Whatever this is, it is not your failure." A breath. "But I need to know, and I need you to know. So we're going to find out together." Another silence. Longer this time. "Yes, sir." And Tobin. He watched Mara fumble her key at the door. "I want a full workup on whoever raised Mara Shaw. Reno, Nevada. I want her medical records. I want her tax returns for the last 26 years. I want every photograph of her that has ever existed on my desk by 9. And find Eleanor's sister. I want you to sit with her before the week is out." "Yes, sir." Nathan hung up. He watched the door close behind Mara. He sat in the back of the Maybach, in the rain, and he stared at a city he no longer recognized. 2 photographs, side by side. The first was grainy, pulled from a Nevada DMV file. License renewal, 2011. Catherine Shaw, it read, age 34 at the time. Dark hair, not blonde. Brown eyes, not hazel. A scar across the bridge of the nose that Eleanor Harrington had never had. A face that was, objectively, not Eleanor's face. The second photograph was from a hospice intake file, Washoe County, roughly 11 months ago. The name on the file read, Catherine Shaw. The woman in the photograph, bald from chemo, thin to the point of architecture, was not the same woman. Nathan stared at both images for a long time. Tobin's voice, behind him. The real Catherine Shaw died in 2017. Breast cancer. She was 40 at the time. She had one daughter, Mara, whom she had raised in Reno since 1997. There was no husband on record, though there was a boyfriend who came and went for about 4 years when Mara was young. The real Catherine got him out when Mara was 11. He's been in and out of county lockup in Elko ever since. He's not on Mara's birth certificate. There is no father on Mara's birth certificate. Go on. Mara was 20 when Catherine died. She stayed in the trailer. She kept paying the lot rent under her mother's name because it was easier than changing it. For 5 years, she lived there alone, worked 2 shifts at a diner, saved what she could. And the woman in the hospice photograph arrived in Reno about 14 months before your dinner at Vereen. Introduced herself to Mara as a cousin of Catherine's from back east. Moved into the trailer a few weeks later. Her cancer was already advanced when she arrived. 3 months after she moved in, she was sick enough that a new hospice intake form was filed under Catherine Shaw's social security number. She lived about 3 months after the filing. Mara buried her under Catherine's name 8 months ago. The nurse who filed the intake has since been paid very quietly, a large cash sum. We found her in Nogales yesterday. Paid by whom? By a wire out of a private bank in Zurich. The account holder was a woman traveling under a Swiss passport. The name on the passport was Catherine Elizabeth Shaw. The photograph on the passport, Tobin's voice did something almost human. Was your wife, sir? Nathan did not move. She chose that name on purpose, he said quietly. Catherine was her middle name. Shaw was her mother's maiden name. It wasn't a coincidence she ended up at the real Catherine's door. That's what I thought at first, sir. I was wrong. It's more specific than that. We pulled adoption records out of a sealed California file. It took time. In 2015, your wife hired a private investigator in Sacramento. The invoice was paid on a card in her maiden name that she had kept open without telling anyone. She paid him to find the adopting family from a 1997 placement. He found the real Catherine Shaw in Reno and sent your wife a file. That's how she learned the name. She didn't go there. Not then. As far as we can tell, she never went. She just kept the file. For 8 years. For 8 years. It sat in a safety deposit box under the Shaw name in a bank in Stamford. We opened it yesterday. Your wife had been paying the box fee in cash annually, through a service. That was all that was in it. A photograph of Mara at 17, taken from a distance, and the file. No other surveillance, no return trips. Until she got sick. Until she got sick. One more thing, sir. I sat with your sister-in-law yesterday morning. She knew about the Swiss man. She'd known for 3 years. She didn't know about the baby. Your wife never told anyone about the baby. Nathan did not answer. On his desk, the hospice photograph stared up at him. Bald, skeletal, smiling with the tired grace of the dying. He had been looking at the wrong detail. He had been looking at her face, at what chemo and suffering had subtracted from it. He should have been looking at her hands. On the right hand, on the third finger, was a thin band of platinum, a single old mine-cut diamond. He had designed that ring himself, in 2014, for his wife. There was, in the world, exactly one of those. Mara arrived at 9 a.m., exactly. She was wearing jeans and a gray sweater, and her hair was down, and she looked, without the uniform, like any pretty tired girl on any subway platform in the city. Tobin walked her in. She sat across from Nathan in a leather chair that had cost more than her mother's trailer. Nathan did not show her the DMV photograph. He showed her the hospice photograph. He pointed, without speaking, at her mother's hand. That ring, he said. His voice was not even. It was not even at all. Where is it now? Mara's face did something complicated. In my jewelry box, she said. At home. She gave it to me with the locket. She said she was sorry she'd never had a real one to leave me. Mara. Nathan leaned forward. Look at the face in the photograph. Look carefully. Is that the woman you believed was your mother's cousin? Mara looked. For a long time, she looked. Yes, she said finally, her voice breaking. That's her. That's the woman who came to stay with me over a year ago. She said she was my mom's cousin from back east. My mom had never mentioned her. But my mom didn't mention a lot of things. She wouldn't leave. She paid what rent she could in cash. She took me to get my GED. She told me she was sorry she hadn't come sooner. I thought. Mara's voice broke. I thought she was being kind. Nathan closed his eyes. Somewhere, in a quiet corner of his mind, a door he had not opened in 2 years and 4 months creaked, just a little, on its hinges. Mara. He opened his eyes. The woman who came to stay with you. The woman you thought was a cousin. She wasn't a cousin. Mara waited, not breathing. She was your mother, Nathan said. Your biological mother. The one who gave birth to you in 1997 and placed you with Catherine Shaw through a private adoption. She was also my wife. It took Tobin Reeves 11 more days to assemble the full picture. The body in the Portuguese casket was exhumed on a Thursday in a small Catholic cemetery outside Scarsdale, and DNA was extracted from a femur. It did not match the DNA on file for Eleanor Harrington at Sloan Kettering, where Eleanor had been a patient for an ovarian cyst in 2018. 10 months later, she had quietly requested a second read of the imaging, a request she had made under her maiden name, paid for in cash. The second radiologist had flagged the cyst as worth rescanning. Eleanor had never followed up. She had written the appointment off. From what Tobin could piece together, she had known even then, 5 years before she ran what was probably coming for her. The body in the casket belonged to a woman between 35 and 45 who had drowned in the Atlantic, roughly 72 hours before she was recovered. A fisherman's widow from a village north of Nazaré reported missing by her family the day before Eleanor's crash. Never found by the local authorities, because the local authorities had stopped looking once a dead American woman wearing a wedding ring and a saint. Christopher medal had been pulled from the same stretch of water. The wedding ring and the medal, Tobin would later confirm, had been threaded onto the drowned woman's hand and neck by someone who had entered the morgue on a forged credential the night before the formal identification. The security footage from that night had been wiped. The morgue attendant had retired 3 weeks later to a small cottage in the Azores that he had paid for, apparently, in cash. The man who had walked through the morgue door on the footage recovered from a backup server was not Eleanor. He was a tall, gray-templed Swiss national whose passport had, 2 years later, been used to buy Eleanor's one-way ticket from Madrid. Eleanor Harrington had not died in Portugal. Eleanor Harrington had driven off a cliff road deliberately, at a speed she had calculated, into a stretch of water she had studied from 3 different summer rentals, in 3 different years, 10 miles up and down the same coast. She had climbed out of the rental car in the shallows. She had walked, bleeding and concussed, to a fishing village, where the Swiss man was already waiting for her. She had met him at a conference in Geneva 6 years before the crash. She had been in love with him for 2 of them. She had flown out of Madrid under a name she had been preparing since 2015, Catherine Elizabeth Shaw, her own middle name, her mother's maiden name, the same name, not by coincidence, as the woman in Reno who had been raising her daughter. She had hired a PI in 2015 to find the family who had adopted her baby, and the PI had come back with the name Catherine Shaw, and Eleanor, who had given the baby her own middle name as a first, must have stood in her kitchen and understood that the universe had handed her the only alibi she would ever need. She kept the file. For 8 years, she did nothing. She had lived with the Swiss man in a town outside Seville for just over a year after the crash. She had been happy, the Spanish neighbors said. She had kept a garden. She had learned to make salmorejo, and then the cancer that a second radiologist had flagged years earlier had found her, the way she must have always known it would, and she had understood very quickly and very brutally that she was going to die after all. She had not come back to Nathan. She had come back to the daughter she had given up in 1997, when she was 20 years old and a sophomore at Yale and pregnant by a boy she had never named, a boy whose name was not in any file Tobin could find. She had placed the baby with Catherine Shaw through a private adoption in California. She had chosen the name Mara herself. Catherine Shaw had raised Mara in a trailer outside Reno. Catherine Shaw had died of breast cancer in 2017, when Mara was 20. For 5 years after that, Mara had lived alone in the trailer, working 2 shifts at a diner, keeping the lot rent paid under a dead woman's name. Eleanor had arrived on her doorstep about 14 months before the night at Varine, 3 months after her own diagnosis in Seville, presenting herself as Catherine's cousin from back east. She had moved in. She had paid what bills she could pay without triggering a trace. She had taken Mara to get her GED. She had spent the last months of her life being a mother, in the only way she had left, to the daughter she had given away nearly 3 decades before. It was the first time she had ever met her, on her deathbed. Eleanor, who had let the world believe, who had let Nathan believe, who had never touched a dollar of the insurance that had paid out in her name, had given Mara the locket and the ring, and had said, to the man with the gray eyes, that she was sorry, and that she hoped he had found someone else. He had not found someone else. He sat, on a Tuesday evening, 11 days after the restaurant, in Mara Shaw's tiny Astoria apartment, on a couch that sagged in the middle, and Mara sat across from him with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, and neither of them spoke for a long time. "I didn't know," Mara said finally. Her voice was small. "I swear to God, Mr. Harrington, I didn't know who she was. I didn't know who you were. I know. The job at the restaurant, I took it because it paid $3 an hour more than the diner. I wore the locket because it was the only thing she left me. I wasn't. Mara, I know." She looked at him, and he saw, for the first time, how much her eyes were not Eleanor's. Eleanor's had been a flat, warm hazel. Mara's were that strange sea-glass green, and how much, in the small, quiet way of her hands, they were. The way she cradled the mug, the way her thumb traced the rim. "She told me, at the end," Mara said. "She told me she had been a coward her whole life. She said she had loved a good man, and she had run away from him because she was afraid of him seeing the parts of herself she had hidden since she was 20 years old. She said she was sorry she hadn't been brave enough to come home." Nathan did not speak for a long time. What he wanted to say, if he had been honest, was that Eleanor had known where her daughter was for 8 years and had done nothing. That she had sat across from him at breakfast for 8 years and had not told him about a child. That she had waited until she was dying to do a single brave thing, and the brave thing had been for Mara, not for him. He wanted to say that he did not know if he forgave her. He wanted to say that he was not sure he ever would. But Mara was sitting across from him. And Mara had been the one Eleanor had finally shown up for. And whatever Nathan's grievance was with the woman he had married, it was not Mara's grievance to carry. He thought about it. He thought about the 8 years of breakfasts. He thought about the wing at Sloan Kettering that he had never walked through the doors of. He thought about the 43 people he had fired on behalf of a grief that had not, as it turned out, been the grief he believed it was. And he thought, for the first time, that perhaps grief could be the wrong name for a thing, and that calling it by a new name did not require him to stop feeling it, only to stop being run by it. She was a coward, he said finally. She was. And she was also at the very end, for you not one. Those can both be true. I don't know yet what I do with both of them being true. But you don't have to do anything with it, Mara. That part is mine. Mara's eyes filled. Mara, he said, there's something I want to ask you, and you can say no. I want that to be clear. Okay. That thing I noticed, the first night. The way you watched the exits at the restaurant. The way you sat down when Tobin moved half an inch. Tell me about that. Mara went still. When I was little, she said quietly, my mom had a boyfriend who used to come home at 2 a.m. and decide which one of us he was angry at. My mom got him out when I was 11. But you learn some things, and you don't unlearn them. I count exits. I watch hands. I read rooms. Nathan nodded, slowly. And the woman who came and said she was Catherine's cousin, did you ever feel, with her, any of that? At the start, yes. Mara's eyes were full. For the first few weeks I still watched her hands. I couldn't help it. But one night, I woke up on the couch in the living room. I'd fallen asleep there, and she had put a blanket over me, and she was sitting in the kitchen reading a book with a cup of tea, and she hadn't made a single sound. Nobody had ever tried that hard to not wake me up, and something in my chest just stopped. It stopped, and I let it stop. I don't know why. I thought maybe it was just that she listened. She listened the way nobody had ever listened to me. Nathan closed his eyes, just for a second. She loved you, he said. I didn't understand that until yesterday. I understand it now. What do you want from me, Mr. Harrington? He thought about it for a long time. Outside, a siren passed and faded. The radiator knocked. A television murmured through the wall from the neighbor's apartment. I want to know you, he said. That's all. I'm not your father. I have no claim on you. But I loved your mother for the better part of a decade, and it turns out I didn't know her at all. And I think maybe if you'll let me, I could do better by the part of her she left behind. I can help you. Not in the way that frightens you. In whatever way you want. And no way you don't. School. A real apartment. A job that isn't waiting tables for rotated billionaires. You tell me. You say no. I go away and you never hear from me again. You say yes, we figure out the rest. Mara did not answer right away. She looked down at the mug in her hands. She looked at the small oval locket, which she was wearing again, which she had not taken off since the restaurant. She closed her hand around it. Okay, she said. It was not a beginning. It was not an ending. It was just the word okay. In a small apartment in Astoria, on a Tuesday in February, between two people who had been brought together by the most elaborate lie either of them had ever been told. But Nathan Harrington, who had not said the word please in 2 years until 11 nights ago, walked out of that building into the cold and found, for the first time since a phone call at 4:17 a.m., on a ruined October morning, that he could breathe. Hey there, if you made it this far, thank you. Truly, these stories are long, and I know your time is the most valuable thing you have, and the fact that you spent this much of it with me means more than the algorithm will ever show you. I want to ask you something, and I want you to really sit with it before you answer in the comments. Eleanor ran. She loved Nathan, and she ran anyway, because she could not stand the idea of him seeing the parts of herself she had hidden since she was 20 years old. She knew where her daughter was for 8 years. She did nothing until she was dying, and then she went not to the husband she had buried alive, but to the child she had given away. Would you have forgiven her? Would Nathan have forgiven her? If she had lived long enough to walk back through his door? Tell me in the comments. I read them all. I read them late at night with a cup of tea, and I think about you, the stranger on the other side of the screen, who stayed with me for 30+ minutes because something in this story caught you. If this one caught you, tap like, tap subscribe, ring the bell. There's another one coming next week, and I want you to be there for it. Until then, take care of yourself. And if there's someone in your life you've been running from, call them. You never know how much time anyone has left. I'll see you in the next one.